we have created a list view instead of just that boring text bulleted list thing. We use that Android list ID, which automatically was hooked up by the list activity, so we didn't need to do any wiring there. We also use the magic empty ID, which was automatically managed by the list activity. Then we created a custom list view, which had a checkbox and a label. And we created an adapter, which extended base adapter and managed the task list that we had. We listened for clicks to the list and toggled the completeness of a task based on the click. And we added a remove all complete tasks button, which removed all the tasks that were in the completed state. Let's get to questions in just a second. Let me kind of give you a heads up on what the homework could be. So just like I said earlier, base adapter is a very dumb class. There's not much implementation in there at all. There's an easier way to do lists when you don't really care too much about controlling much about the adapter's implementation, and that is hinted at here in the homework. And that adapter is called an array adapter. So instead of using that base adapter and implementing a whole bunch of things, we could just simply use a system class called array adapter. And you can see here what I'm suggesting you do is build a separate project, make yourself a main XML which contains a list, just kind of like we have here in the code, and then change that set the list adapter just like we set the list adapter to the adapter that we created. Set the list adapter to an array adapter, which takes a generic type of string, and use this Android defined Android.r.layout simple list item 1, which just displays a simple string, and then pass it the array list of strings. And you can see that there's a much simpler way to do adapters, given that you don't need to be too flexible. So I like to, in the code that I created today, I like to push a lot of the management of the collection of the data into the adapter. So I did some things like toggling the completeness of the clicked item and inside the adapter. And so if you wanted a little more flexibility, you'd probably have to use a base adapter. But if you don't care about it too much, you can use this array adapter. And that is a good piece of homework for kind of understanding a bit more about how lists work out there in the wild. And thanks for tuning in. We'll take questions in a second, but next week we're going to be taking the application that we have so far and making it persistent so that when if you shut off the power on your phone or reinstall the application during development, during a screencast or something, then the tasks that you added last time will stick around. So that's what we have. Let's take some questions.
All right. Yeah, we have quite a few. One of the points that somebody on the chat room is making is that the name for the magic IDs is the Android Convention ID. Does that sound right to you? Is that the official name for them?
I haven't heard that, which it could be. I mean, well, that's kind of how it works, isn't it? I mean, by using that convention, I don't have to tell the list activity what list to use. It just knows how to go into the view that's set as the content view on the activity and find the list that it needs to use.
Yep.
So it's using a convention to do that.
Is related to that is @id/Android:list the same thing as @Android:ID/list?
I don't know.
Okay.
Let's try it. Let's try it and see. What is it? I'm just guessing here. Android. If I could spell. Like this. Let's give it a look. No, it is not, because it doesn't know what that is. So what he's talking about is where was that task list item? What he's talking about is this type of thing.
Ah, right. Okay.
And this is, I don't know, I can't really say much about, this is beyond the scope of our class. This is weird. I kind of know what's going on because I've kicked around in the code, but I can't explain to you why you would care about this kind of stuff, because it would be used in like more complex situations where you wanted to make an application like kind of dynamically skinnable, I guess, and you would define a set of attributes that you would use as here are the things that you can look up that have names, and then the implementation could be different based on things that are defined in other XML files elsewhere. But I don't know. We can discuss more about that on the forums because that's just a weird thing. And I found that code somewhere in the Android source code for some apps, and that's what I used. So hopefully that's not throwing too many people off.
Okay.
But at least that answers that question.
Yep. Another question I got was, is notify dataset changed a method on the adapter?
Yes. So this is implemented on base adapter. It's one of the thin pieces of implementation that base adapter gives you.
Okay, and then one last one for me, and then I'll hand it over to Sarah and Ruth. I know they're itching to go with questions. Somebody asked to go, if you could do just a really quick review of what the context is again.
A context is just like the name means. It's some information about the situation into which like something new is going to begin to be used, I guess, is a general way of saying it. So every activity extends context up the chain. List activity here extends activity, which extends, I think, context at the top. I don't know. I could pull up the docs, but I won't waste time on trying to find it right now. If you want to go look at the inheritance chain of activity, it will get you up to a context. And the context has some information that is important for views that are getting created. So generally you'll be passing around a context when you're creating views, because somewhere up the inheritance chain someone needs to know about the context that it's getting displayed into.
Okay, so it sounds like
I'm not really sure what else is on context.
Okay, so it sounds like it's the current activity that you're in is the context.
Yeah, it turns out being the current activity in a lot of cases, but the reason for it is I'm opening up the context class here, and I don't have source attached, but it'll maybe show some of the methods that are on it.
Well, it sounds like a good...
And I can pull that up while we're...
Yeah, it sounds like a good thing to discuss in the forums, too.
Yeah,
more details.
So are these magic, quote-unquote, IDs officially supported by the SDK, or are they under-the-hood features that might be subject to removal later in the releases?
That's a good question. I mean, these are the way that Android apps are built, and I wouldn't really call an Android app that is shipped with the phone like a private app. So like implementation that it uses, I would think, even though Google has special knowledge whenever they change something about the SDK, then they would have to fix all the apps that used whatever they fixed or deprecated. I don't know. My intuition says don't worry too much about using those things, because that's the way the Android, like say your contact manager on your Android phone, it's using the same. I think that. I mean, I think that's. I don't remember what apps that I looked at that use this Android list thing, but they're all using this ID the same way. So I wouldn't call it private. But that's a good question. That's definitely something to look into.
I have a long question. Someone wrote, I heard Android recently got a multi-touch update. Now, if I add lots of tasks so that the screen real estate is used up and then swipe my finger to scroll, do I need something special to implement that? Or will the Android ADT Auto take care of such low-level stuff?
That'll take care of low-level stuff. Well, why don't I add a bunch of tasks while we take the next question, and we can look at that actually working.
And then if you set add task to fill parent and remove complete to fill parent, would they be 50% each with padding, of course?
No, it's a pain to make things 50% to take up 50% of the screen. No, they don't magically do that. You either get fill parent or you get wrap content, and wrap content takes as big as, it caused the problem that Paul pointed out earlier. Add task, fill parent just fills up the whole thing and doesn't care about what's next to it. So you'd need to use another type of layout, or you would need to like put an exact pixel width, which is a bad thing to do, because if you put an exact pixel width and you changed orientation, then they wouldn't take up as much of the screen. It would break your layout a little bit. and it's really kind of a pain to get things to lay out 50% next to each other. I really wish they had percentage-based layouts is the answer to the question, but they do not. And here's an example of the list scrolling. That's just right out of the box what the list view does.
Okay, then I had a couple of more extraneous questions. I don't even know if they're here and if we need to post these on the forum. The poster agreed to that, and that is they're interested in using auto getters and setters in Eclipse, and you demonstrated that earlier in the class by using the fields, and they wanted to see a demo of that again because they didn't quite catch that. They're not quite as used to Eclipse as others.
Yeah, I guess that's in the scope of the class because I keep talking about that stuff, don't I? So let me go to a simple class and do that really quickly. Let's say we wanted to add a variable. I'm just going to type it straight through. So I want to add a variable object called foo. Now I've added a private variable which is never referenced, so the compiler says, hey, are you sure that you want this thing because it's never referenced? And luckily, because that is never referenced, Eclipse sees that as a warning and gives me this little hover guy. So I can come here and say create getter and setter for foo, and then it will give me this dialog box. But if I cancel out of that, I can always do this by going to source, generate getters and setters, and this will allow me to pick any of the fields that I have set up that do not already have a getter and setter, so I can pick foo, and then tell it where I want it inserted, tell it the access modifiers and stuff like that. Click OK, and it generates based on the name foo, get foo, and set foo, which takes the type of foo and sets it to the object here. Hopefully everybody caught that. And otherwise we can take it to the forums.
And we have an audience member who had some questions about his code.
I'm not using quite the same environment that you're using. I'm using IntelliJ, and it takes a very dim view. Although it will accept it and the code seems to work, it takes a very dim view of having checked text view in the XML, and I'm wondering if there's some XSD which isn't very happy about it.
That definitely could be. Maybe that is because I don't know. So why don't we take the next question and come back to this one while I look on the docs and see if check text view is actually there in the docs.
I have a question. If you have multiple views, how does Adapter know to which view it has to notify? Which view it
By
has to
position.
By position?
Well, okay, I guess that's kind of a trite answer. Let's go back and here just a second. Let me kick this guy off. Yeah, it finds it checks XView in the documents. I don't know, it's right there. I'd say the problem is probably with the whatever IDE type setup you're using in IntelliJ. Are you just using stuff in the command line?
Oh no, it's an IDE. It's got its own Android plugin. Does most of the right
interesting.
things.
Maybe you could raise this up as a bug to them.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's any problem with it, and Android doesn't think there's any problem with it. Okay, so the question was, I guess when something is tapped, how does it know what view to reference about the adapter again?
If we have multiple views, how does Adapter know to which view it has to notify?
Well, I mean, that's why there are these getItemID and the position variables being passed around a lot. So the position, I mean, if you think about it, you wouldn't want to do it, well, I mean, there may be some weird situations where you have to you could manage two lists into one list view, two lists of data or two array lists of data or more into one view. I mean, and that's what an adapter would be good for too. But the position in the overall list, the adapter needs to know how to translate the position, because you can see position is an argument here to just about every of these important methods. So it needs to know based on position. And even the methods that I implemented took a position and figured out which task we're talking about. And it can always get reference to the view by position, given that the view is on the screen. And actually, really, I mean, get view is the only place that adapter cares about the view too. Is another, I guess, interesting part to the answer. So everything is done by position inside the adapter. I think that is the answer to that question.
Okay. And I have one more question. Do you know of a list that you can find somewhere of available Android components?
Yeah, that was asked earlier. Now, I guess is a fine time as any. Well, no, I kind of pushed it off. I kind of pushed it off to the forums or something. But like, just unless you want to go figure out how to look through the source code, which I'm not going to talk about just yet because it's kind of complicated. You need to go to developers.android.com, which is one of the reference links that we have up on the forums. That's the documentation for everything. You can go poke around the dev guide, and a lot of things will pop out to you there based on more sort of interesting topics, like under user interface, building custom components, or binding to data with an adapter view, those kind of things. That you'll run into a lot of components that are used in there. Like, say, for instance, alert dialog, which is right here. Or you can go to the reference and look down the whole class list, because every one of those like, for instance, here's check text view, the one that I used for our each item renderer. Implements checkable, so that means it has a checked method, or a check method, I think, or set checked, yeah, set checked and get is checked. And then it has its own toggle, which is interesting too, because that's how we implemented task. And it extends text view, and which extends view, which extends object. I don't know. You can just sort of look around in the Android widget package, and here are all the widgets and things that have to do with widgets, like adapters and checkable. I guess, I mean, this without knowing what you want to implement, I couldn't tell you what components are important. But here's a list of all the components, and you can kind of get a good sense of them and figure out where you could use those in your own applications later.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony. I think we're going to wrap it up because we're already 16 minutes over time. So
My goodness. Time flies. All right.
Thanks, everybody, for sticking around so long. And we'll give Tony a round of applause and say thank you very much.